Good evening. I'm Angela. Today I'm going to tell you guys a story about my grandpa. This is my grandpa. He's 92, the oldest in my family, which means his life experiences have been very different from mine. I've gained so much wisdom from listening to his life stories, and he also helps me to gain new perspective on my life experiences as well. During the 5th grade, at a summer camp, I became close friend with a girl from Japan whose name was Fuka. I told my grandpa everything about Fuka, and I told him that I wanted to invite her to our house. But what I didn't expect is that he shouted at me through the phone, and he told me that he would never allow a Japanese to step into his house. I was angry, confused, and upset. This is not like anything I would expected my grandfather to do. I asked why, but he did not give me an answer. It was until 5 years later that my grandpa finally decided to share his reasons with me. When he was around my age, the World War II was going on, and he was a Chinese soldier who was stationed in the battleground. He lost a lot of friends and 2 rib bones to the war. Because of this trauma, has blamed Japan for his pain. That was the time that I finally started to understand the sorrow and pain inside my grandpa. I sometimes ask myself, do I really know him? I learned the history from the textbook, but when really it comes to befriend who is a girl from Japan and she's the same age as me, to be honest, as a youth, I cannot understand the pain inside him, which leads to the discomfort between us for 5 years. The conflict between my grandpa and I is a product of a common phenomenon. People have judgments based on their personal experiences. Because of his personal history with Japan, my grandpa was not willing to welcome a Japanese to his house. Because I was not aware of his experiences, I thought he was being irrational. The inability to understand the reasons behind his actions is actually the product of different gaps that exist between us. First, there's a gap of experience. People from different educational backgrounds, social background, and living environment tend to have totally different world conception and value conception. And without these differences and these gaps, it's really hard for us to communicate, and these provide a lot of inconvenience and restrict comprehension among people. Second, there's a generation gap. People from different age groups tend to think about problems differently. And we usually refer to the ones who apply to this gap as the younger generation and the older generation. These generations tend to think about one problem as 2 totally different aspects. And there are a lot of perspectives that actually causes this gap. Technology, for example. It usually takes huge effort for the elders like my grandpa to learn how to use technology such as sending a picture on social media or sending emoji via iMessage. It seems little, but since we're so reliant on technology these days, being not able to use them effectively, the elders cannot gain information as well as the younger generation does, which gradually makes the gap bigger and bigger. So now we have two gaps, the experience gap and the generation gap. These 2 gaps have a lot of similarities, and they actually works very well together. Youth does not have enough experiences, so it's hard for them to communicate actively with the old. Well, without the different major focuses and different topics while chatting, it's hard for people who come from different age groups to become friends. Well, different generation has totally different major focuses and popular things going on which affect the way of life. And these differences usually reflect on, let's say, hobbies and topics on conversation. So now, let's think about a problem, a question. Who causes these gaps? And what causes these gaps? There's actually no clear answer. We usually think, oh, it's the elders' responsibility because they have more experience, so they should be the one who try to communicate with the youth. However, only their compromise cannot change the whole picture, because no one's absolute, complete, and perfect. Both generations can be benefited by coming closer and to understand each other's viewpoint. So let's say The older generation can learn many new techniques like how to use a smartphone and how to use computer or other new advanced technologies from the youth. They should be able to accept the frequent changes of the world and how people have so different worldviews these days, because we all know change is inevitable. On the other hand, us, as youth, should try to know the old mind sympathetically and try to understand the reasons behind their actions. And now, let's think about it. After we know what causes these gaps, let's think about how can we bridge these gaps. I think it's first very important to have a correct mindset, to respect the difference, but not avoid it. Because it's not helpful to escape from the problems. Both generations should be know that it is critical to understanding and communicating with each other. Talk more and speak more with the person that you think you're experiencing a gap with, not only to explain your thoughts to them, but also listen and be listening attentively to what's their thoughts as well. So here are some advices that may help you during your process of bridging these gaps. First is to have effective communication. Both people from different generations usually have totally different worldviews, and they just don't want to listen to each other's viewpoint and try to understand the issue. It is critical that both sides should be willing to listen as not only what has happened, but why it happens. By listening attentively, both sides can understand each other's viewpoint much better. Second is to control your temper during a quarrel. We all know anger has never solved anything. It can only escalate divides among us. Instead of getting angry and criticizing the one that you're speaking to, give them more patience on both explaining and listening. Finally, which I personally find the most important thing is to watch out carefully the words you're using. Words have powers. Words can create or break a communication. Sometimes we'll only say something that can make ourselves feel good. But if what we say can actually hurt others' feelings, then why say it at all? Only when you add respect and value to your conversations can you build a long-lasting relationship. Our society is built of both the younger generation and the older generation. It cannot progress without the active contribution of both. They should be mutually satisfied, and their existence should be based on our honor and our love. Thank you.